where you are. My name is Jeannie Birch. I'm the co-director of Penn IOR, and I'm very, very happy to introduce our three panelists today. Our first panelist is Kelly Kennedy. Kelly is the research coordinator and lab manager for the Galapagos Education and Research Alliance. The project has been going on for several years, which takes her to the Galapagos for months at a time, as well as working here. Our projects are on the island of San Cristobal in the Galapagos, and she's been involved in this work before the founding of the Alliance and is working with Michael Weisberg, who is the acting faculty director of Perry Worldhouse right now. And she completed her undergrad degree here at Penn. She majored in psychology and the philosophy of science. I'm not sure that prepared you for, you'll have to tell us how that prepared you for the Galapagos in your talk. So you want to tell us now about your activities, and then I'll introduce the other two.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I'm the lab manager and research coordinator for the Galapagos Education and Research Alliance. And I do have a photo here on the slide that just has a map for you. I must admit, it's not extremely drawn to scale. The Galapagos Islands are pretty far off the coast of Ecuador, but our work focuses in this archipelago and specifically on one island, San Cristobal Island. Our work is global engagement, but that's really the wheelhouse here in Perry Worldhouse, but it's also philosophy of science research. So my studies undergrad really did prepare me quite well for this role insofar as we look at the process of science and seek to change some of the processes themselves to see if we can do science in a similar way and maybe get different results. Get the same results would be great, but different results, potentially unexpected results that lead to more ethical conducting of research globally. So this philosophy of science approach is different from science as usual, especially in Galapagos, where usually the people who are doing research are international researchers, much like us from Penn going and conducting research. Instead, we're working directly with the community in a model referred to as community science. Community science is backed by a principle of social ecology, and it's similar to a public health topic of One Health. That concept integrates and recognizes the interconnectedness of humans, animals, and their environment. And this approach is really what's behind our community science model. Ecuador, where the Galapagos is located, is a special case. They have a special law, actually, that gives nature and the environment rights in the Constitution. This is novel and doesn't frequently occur, but it is given way to the Galapagos National Park being founded. This Galapagos National Park means that 97% of Galapagos cannot be inhabited. Only 3% is inhabited by humans. Many people are surprised to hear that humans live in Galapagos. There are almost about 40,000 people or more living on this 3% of the land. So we know that engaging these local people who already live here on the islands is a different approach to science, especially that's been done in Galapagos, but it's one that we believe can cultivate a sense of stewardship through meaningful involvement in the scientific process in local members who already have expertise on various topics of interest, but are moreover experts locally because they live and have lived in these islands, and they know better and more intimately the subject topics than any other researcher from another place could really have. So when we think about Galapagos and we think about ecologically sensitive urban places with climate change, we do have specific threats that face the Galapagos, and some of our projects focus on those. If you can go to the next slide. This is just an example of some of the flooding that can happen in Galapagos. The islands are volcanic islands. Going from the highlands to the lowlands, you notice that there are a lot of ravines in the topology of the islands. They're called encañadas, and these encañadas can overflow with torrential downpours. The infrastructure isn't kind of built for these types of heavy, unpredictable rains. And the urban areas that are built around the coastline haven't been built with these plans in mind. So flooding, for instance, is one specific threat that faces the Galapagos and the people that live there. Another one is heat. It's on the equator, the archipelago, and so the sunshine is very strong and UV rays are very strong. But above that, there's not a ton of overhead coverage in Galapagos. There are not a ton of trees that provide shade for people living in urban areas. And as more urbanization begins to occur, even in just those 3% of the islands, you see more concrete and less trees. So it does make the population even more vulnerable to the sunlight that already is pretty strong. And lastly, there's a pattern called El Nino, and this is an unpredictable weather pattern, and it's made even weirder by climate change, more unpredictable. It brings warmer waters into the ocean, and that can have a grave effect on the local marine species specifically. But two, it can affect the weather patterns overall on the island, making these rains and heat more frequent. So one of our projects that focuses on all of these projects and all these problems is our climate change adaptation project. If you go to the next slide. This project works with some local people living in Galapagos. Some people are trained in some aspects that are relevant to the research. This project seeks to interview local people and obtain historical information about the risks that have faced this community based on climate change and how they were overcome, what worked and what didn't work, so we can better understand what risks may face the Galapagos in the coming years as climate change begins to become even more of an issue there. So some of these local people are radio interviewers or people who work in hospitality and have a lot of time talking with people in their normal job. But two, it can be people who are like parents and just members of the community who have the time and are interested in the topic to be trained and help us collect interview data. We're currently in the process of coding these interviews, and we're going to be working together with these local community members to analyze the data and to generate solutions to kind of address these problems that come up again and again in the interviews. Again, if you can go to the next slide. This is another example of just sharing this research. It's not just working together to train people for interviews, it's also teaching about climate change and the threats that face the community. In this example, this is one of our students, Leah Enriquez, who is a senior here at Penn, and our local coordinator, Wilson Castillo, on a radio show in Galapagos, just talking about climate change. If you go to the next slide. Another project that we do is focusing on mental health and climate change. Not a lot of projects exist related to this topic. In 2022, Dr. Victoria Moffat, pictured here, did some research with adolescents living in San Cristobal Island, asking them about climate change and their perceptions of the future of the island based around the impacts of climate change. This is just an example of her sharing some of these results, but if you can go to the next slide, you can see some of the images that were drawn by some of the participants in this research study when asked, what will San Cristobal look like in 100 years? 63% of these images were negative. The future outlook had various aspects of pollution, contamination, and climate change. Only about 17% were positive and about 17% were neutral, neither negative towards the future or positive. But the 63% of negative responses was pretty striking for us. There was also a lot of confusion around what climate change is and how it relates to contamination. So this research originally started in 2022. In 2023, we've begun to address dispelling these misconceptions as well as creating interventions for these adolescents living on the island. If you can go to the next slide. This is just one example of teaching a breathing activity and some coping mechanisms locally to students. A lot of these activities were informed a great deal by a book called All the Feelings Under the Sun by Dr. Leslie Davenport. It's a book that addresses climate change with kids. And we've been kind of devising these interventions and trying them out with local students. And we hope to continue to design these interventions and create new ones to hopefully train local caretakers, adults in the community, teachers, mentors, to be able to share this kind of information with the kids that are living on the island who clearly are in need of some of this coping mechanism and education. But yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kelly. That's a terrific view of what's happening at the locality and the community. As you may or may not know, the Galapagos are noted for its wildlife. I'm sure you've seen photos of the turtles, and in one of those images that the children drew, there were the seals on the coastline. There are rare birds and so forth. The Galapagos are totally dependent on imports for food, for services, for building supplies, and so forth. Dependent on fossil fuel, ships, planes, etc. And tourism has become a huge industry there. The islands and the country are concerned about how to manage that tourism as it comes in conflict with the things that are being looked at by the tourist. And so that has become a terrific issue as well. So Simon and Josh last year approached me because I had a student who was looking at how we could turn Galapagos more green and did a particular project on that. And though he had done the research and Kelly is doing the research on what she's doing and locally and globally, and now we have local and global concerns about the Galapagos, the issue is how do we make people understand how to deal with these problems? And fortunately, Simon and Josh had a class on animation whose focus among one things was making people more aware of climate change. Simon Richter, who's the class of 1942 endowed professor of Germanic studies, has been engaging in research and teaching on the cultural aspects of climate change and adaptation and resilience. He's taken classes to the Netherlands, to Germany, to Indonesia, and here in the United States. His own research and the classes are focusing on activities that blur the distinctions between traditional scholarship, urban design, and environmental activism. It is Simon who instigated the Penn 1.5-minute climate lectures that are going on right now, right? But we're here.
That was yesterday.
That was yesterday. Oh, good. All right. We're not competing.
You have to, Mike Mann said before the entire public that the reason he came to Penn was because of because of Climate Week.
Lucky for us, lucky us. So they started this in 2019 along with Billy Fleming. They initiated Climate Week in 2020. So this activity, as you know, is part of that. And I had the great privilege of co-teaching a course with Simon a few years ago on water and how we think about water in cities. It was great fun. We looked at literature and we looked at city planning and so on and so forth. But he's gone on to even greater things, the work that he's doing. And Josh is professor of fine arts here, and he received his MFA and BFA from the School of Art at the Art Institute of Chicago and his AA from Los Angeles Community College. He's the recipient of the Joseph H. Hazen Rome Prize, very exciting, getting to go to Rome, the Pew Fellowship in the Arts, the Lewis Comfort Tiffany Foundation Award, and the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts Fellowship. His own work, his own artistic work is really phenomenal, and I recommend that to you. But his teaching with Simon has yielded a very interesting product, which they're going to tell you about right now. So Simon, Josh, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeannie. So there's Simon and I started working together about 3 years ago on many different things. I'm getting feedback here. Maybe I'll move here. I'm just getting a feedback. Oh, okay. Yeah, so I'll sit here just adapting. Yeah, it was coming from, okay. So
feels much better.
Okay, so we've been working in many different ways together. And initially, Simon started this series of animated videos that addressed and investigated opportunities to adapt to climate, focused on the Netherlands in the beginning, and hired some of my former students to work on these animations. And so after the first episode, then Simon and I connected and with the sort of hope of both making more and speeding up the process and seeing how we could take it further. And it was an exciting opportunity for me because this is the kind of experience that someone who's a student at Penn studying animation can have at Penn, but it's not something that could happen at an art school where you have people who work in all kinds of disciplines. You have experts in many different fields, and the opportunity for the students to develop a new way of working in communication and design and animation that's actually integrated into persuasion, research, communication, and sort of reaching specific audiences. So after a while, this things just seem to come to us at the same moment somehow. But we decided to teach a course together where we would work with the students, would divide into groups of 4 students and work with different researchers in different labs or different projects of research or people who have communications needs at Penn. And so we called that class the environmental animation class. Meanwhile, while that was happening, we decided to start a lab called the Penn Animation as Research Lab, where we could work with I mean, so the class is within this lab, but we can also work with other researchers. Simon's Poltergeist project is within the lab, and then we also have the potential to develop other kinds of collaborations, maybe with other animation faculty, with other art faculty, with other visualizers, with and other research labs. So it would be sort of a place where we can get these projects off the ground. Would it be possible to go back to one of your slides? There's the slide with the drawings that the kids did. Perfect. Okay. I was looking at that. I was like, that's a great project. That's such a great project. One of the things that is so quick right now is photography, is taking pictures. And then you can take them and then you look back at your pictures and you see what the longer you look, the more you see, and the more you realize that was there. And that process is so different than the process of drawing. First you put out what you know, and then it sort of raises these questions that it raises these questions because all of the white areas or the relationships between things, if these kids go back, they will now have this out of their mind and see things more closely. I think they can see things more the next time that they draw it. And so I've been thinking of this drawing process as we work together as a sort of stages of speaking and then learning. It's kind of it's a documentation. It's a document. It's the series of drawings that we do. And I'm not talking about an animation like a series of drawings, but when we go from showing you storyboards to the next stage where the students are doing rough animation to the fine animation, and we realize that's not a truck from the Galapagos, or that's not what a that's not what a solar farm would look like. They wouldn't be there; they would be here. Those kinds of things. As we're drawing in each revision, the students are shifting what they know and they're realizing what they don't know. And that's where they got the information. Well, we started with one of your reports, and then you went and you had these, and you did on your trip with Kelly, and you had these incredible photographs, and right, and with Luke Campo, right? So Luke Campo, your student, took all of these photographs, and then we had meetings with Luke, and Luke sort of explained what we were seeing. And so there is this thing of like, there's the picture, and then there's what we know about the picture, and what we're hoping is that the drawing can kind of go further and then sort of tell what we know about what's going on in the picture.
I think that we also asked Luke and Jeannie questions. So we were asking questions that had to do with representation at a certain point. But before that, we had questions, and they were like research questions or questions that said, challenge you, Jeannie and Luke, to go a little deeper. We spoke to other experts as well. And I think if I can formulate what you said in different words coming from my perspective as a humanities professor and a scholar, I think we chose we chose animation as research as our sort of motto or slogan, in imitation of research, what's it called? Research as design, or design as research, right? So there's an idea there that the animators, the artists, are involved in the research process. And that's really, really crucial, because so often
They're probing questions,
yeah,
right?
exactly. So often it's just, the researchers do the research, and when they're all done, they turn to their animators or illustrators or artists and say, here, you draw this for us.
And then the next step is, it's one thing to draw and take pictures, but it's another thing to hit the hearts and minds of
Exactly.
people.
Yeah.
That's where the art comes in. And so tell us a little about
Yeah.
that.
Okay, so it was what the Germans would call Wechselwirkung. It's a back and forth between the artists and the researchers, the scientists, and it's a very productive back and forth. And what it's aiming towards is finding that story, right? Figuring out what is the story and what's the best way to tell that story. Researchers may know what they want to explain, but that's not the same thing as the story. And so it does take not just the artists have to be in at the ground floor, essentially, because they really need to understand the research. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to come up with anything but a really glib kind of cliche story. And we need to tell really a story that amounts to an intervention, right? That actually gets somewhere.
And people are exposed to so much animation, so much communication today. The question is, how can you make it stick?
Shall we show the video?
So we should show it. So we should show it. So what you'll see is the video that we produced. We have a special version today that is, so it was produced in Spanish and English with closed captioning. And what you'll see today is the Spanish version with an English subtitle, which is like a third variation. So
right.
we'll run it.
So there were 4 artists. You'll see their names at the end. And of course, Jeannie and Luke, and we talked to Michael. Did we talk to you, Kelly? Yeah, but we talked to numerous others. Maurizio, we spoke with him as well.
The former mayor of Quito.
Right, the former mayor of Quito.
But these are undergraduates.
These are undergraduate students. For undergraduate fine art students, this was a really unusual experience. They're just not accustomed to talking to experts and researchers about something that has zero to do with art. So it was challenging. We learned a lot from this experience. We got 2 really good videos out of this, and we look forward to doing more of this kind of thing. So if you all are members of labs, or you run a lab and would be interested in something along these lines, do talk to Joshua and me. We have really cool business cards. Volume.
I'm glad I clapped for that. So I'd like to hear from the audience, what you thought about that. What do you remember having seen it? Don't be shy. I'm going to call on you. Yes.
But just seeing the visual of, like, let's say one of the cargo containers falling into the ocean, the cost associated for all those necessary things, it's kind of terrifying because you think that, like, it's not a sustainable or resourceful act. So bring in cost more than 3%.
Yeah, one of the things actually that doesn't get shown here is that the invasive species are a huge problem in the Galapagos right now. And theoretically, every bit of cargo is looked at in Guayaquil, the main port where it comes from, and then comes onto the island. But the inspection system is not effective, should we say? I'm looking at Kelly.
It's complicated.
It really is. And so one of the suggestions in the proposals was to create a single port, because right now the products are coming into several different ports and then get brought onto land, and who knows what's in those containers and so forth. The idea would be to do a single port where there would be effective inspection of anything that might be invasive, so they could prevent what's happening right now. Kelly?
Yeah, and because of a lot of the checking that needs to be done, it can cause quite a bit of a traffic jam at the one port that's used to often unload things. And because of that, if there's a traffic jam at the port and there's another boat that comes in to deliver things and they can't get in, the items won't make it to the island. And then the local population will not have those items for about 2 weeks until the next boat comes back. So it's yet another thing that gets complicated by the way things are dispersed.
So the logistical chain that we saw, the clock turning rapidly and 3 trucks getting onto a ferry, being brought over to the boat, loading up there, being brought back to land, then driving a little distance, unloading, et cetera, et cetera. That looks cartoonish, but through our questions and examination of photographs, so asking Jeannie and asking Luke, who had observed this closely and were our informants, we were able to make sure that that was accurate. Because one of the things that we've noticed with making these animated videos is that accuracy is essential, because otherwise we have no credibility, and someone will point out a hole in the story, a problem, et cetera, and then we've blown our chance. But we consult with our experts continually in order to make sure that what we state is not only accurate, but shows a level of insight and understanding that surpasses, let's say, common knowledge. That way, the experts are also impressed and are more inclined perhaps to use our videos.
Yeah, the only one suggestion I would make about the animation was when you had the trailer trucks going on the highway. There are no highways.
There's one traffic light in all of San Cristobal.
So the roads are not, and the trucks are not modern. And so, but that's just an artistic thing that we wouldn't really bother about. Others of you, what else did you like? No one liked the turtle, the tortoise? Did you? Yes.
I loved the video, and actually it was interesting because the student I'd been working with this summer, along with other people in my program, was the narrator, and I didn't know he had narrated this. So that was excellent. But my question is who the intended audience was for this. Because I could see it could be, funders for renewables for the Galapagos. I could see potentially being local people supporting tourism, or tourists being more responsible tourists, or, a bunch of different audiences.
I know this question wasn't directed towards me, but it certainly would be useful for local people. I think when I watch it, it resonates so significantly with me, with my knowledge of Galapagos and how things kind of unfold, and certainly would hold weight with local people. And you know, as I was watching it, I was like, oh, I should put this on our Instagram because I bet this would be useful for local people. Yeah.
Well, I know that it was a priority to have it available in Spanish, and it was important for it to be available to decision makers. And I think that we started with your report, Jeannie, and so I think throughout the process, I sort of thought of it as sure, it's very important for the local people, and that sort of came up through our. I mean, this is one of the students' questions too. Who is this for? Who is this for? And we knew it was important for the local people, but we also knew that the local people had all kinds of needs that were beyond sustainable tourism in terms of education. There's a whole set of things, and students were really interested in like, I guess you have 4 Penn students, and you had all kinds of interests and questions interrogating kind of the situation. And the more that we learned, I think what we were looking for was, where could the actionable change happen, and who needs to hear the video? And that was that, and those would be the decision makers in Ecuador. Is that right?
Yeah. I think of these videos often as being conversation starters. So what they're able to do is to get a concept, an idea, an action, or a possible action into the room so people can start talking about it. It does present a sort of a line of argumentation. They can work with it, they can criticize it, they can improve it, and so on, but it starts a conversation. So I think for policymakers, that was what we were thinking on the recommendation or advice of Jeannie and Luke. But we hope that policymakers would see this as an opportunity to use it to talk to their stakeholders.
Yeah, I think your conception is much too narrow. That the Galapagos are symbolic of very fragile environments. It's not just the Galapagos, it's worldwide. There are tons of fragile environments. And the question is how you get people to pay attention to what the fragile environments are, what the threats are to those environments. The images of the tsunami of tourists was just wonderful, because that really is what's happening there. And the tourists are coming in 2 ways. They're coming in by ship and airplane and staying on those boats and ships, and they're coming on land, which is putting more stress on that 3% of the land that can be developed. That means not only are they coming in on land, but the things have to be built to hold them, hotels, the building materials, everything, the food, the building materials, everything comes by ship. Right. So it's not a very sustainable situation. And but at the same time, you have the local community who's saying, we love the tourists. They're bringing money and jobs, and this is our livelihood. And so how you convey a balance that's needed here, not just as I said, not just in the Galapagos, but in any fragile touristic economy. And I think it's a much, much broader audience that you will reach with this for sure. There's no question about that. Other observations? Yes, right here. Amy, the mic. Taking notes, I think.
I'd like to hear a little bit more about the thoughts about the actual video as a cultural object that you've created here, because that to me is the really exciting thing. And it seems like it's a great example of, in the humanities, there's been a lot of talk about the sort of rise of the visual, replacing or supplementing language, words, and so forth. So this university is very much traditionally about words. And now we're creating videos and so forth. I guess I would like to challenge Simon a little bit to explain what's different about this than, say, a traditional essay on the problems, ecological problems of the Galapagos. In particular, I was struck about the relationship between the visual and the narration, which are still words here and so forth, and what makes it different than an essay, I guess.
Okay. And yeah, I think John, I
I
definitely
figure he's already a visual guy. He's gonna.
but I want to hear Josh for sure too. But the first difference is this, that the essay will get read by 3 or 4 people. And the potential for this video to be seen by many, many more, and therefore to be effective, is huge. I'll use the poltergeist videos as an example here. Okay, so so Joshua and I make videos that we call poltergeist videos. There's a character whose name is Dr. Poltergeist. He's bald, he has circular glasses, his ears stick out. He does not look like me at all. And his voice is my voice. But at any rate, he addresses topics that the Dutch find it difficult to speak about in relation to sea level rise. Won't go into why that is, but these videos have been enormously successful in the Netherlands and have created for me a platform where I can use my words. So the videos have opened doors for me, right? So the videos do all kinds of work because teachers adopt them, university professors use them, city councils use them. This is that icebreaker function that I was talking about, you know, a conversation starter function. But beyond that, there's so many ways in which they're used. Folks who have found it difficult to talk about these things, they know they need to be said, but they don't dare to say them, now can say them. So I get emails that tell me that that is the case. And as I said, it's become a platform so that I get interviewed on Dutch national radio, or I'm in a documentary film as a talking head about retreat and so on. If I had just written an essay, Bob, no one would know who I was. Now they know Dr. Poltergeist, and then eventually they figure out that that's Simon Richter.
You're stopping on the street, right?
Yeah, when I was at the UN Water Conference, these Dutch people would approach me and they would say, I know you, you're Dr. Poltergeist. It was incredible, right? So the words never go away, but this is such an incredible vehicle. And the artistry, which is a weaving together of image and words and research, those 3 things, you know, is really amazing. This is, I'd like to turn it over to Joshua now. Yeah.
A couple thoughts that, well, while we're seeing the words, in this case, it's for translation. In the case of the YouTube videos, it's closed captioning. And then we've produced some of those in Dutch and in English, so that we have, so that we're reaching as broad of an audience as possible. So that, but I think that there's a difference between the spoken, performed words and the audio of your voice. So then it might be more like a talk, but not like reading a paper, but there's a bit of performance in it. I'm not sure if that shows up in this video, but it does. There's a song to it. There's a song to hearing it in a way that, and I think that that's something that we've so what that does is it holds time. It brings focus to it. It creates pauses. Maybe there's this relationship between what's happening in the image and what's happening in the text that kind of weaves in and out of your attention. So I think that that's something that's unique to this form. There's the process of producing it. The essay might be written from notes that are from individual interviews. In this case, we have a team of people that kind of writing and making the visual essay. And so there's discussion among the team in a way that's outside. There's kind of a negotiation of how to approach things. The students draw pictures. I'm talking about poltergeist now, maybe this too. Students draw pictures that we didn't expect, maybe ways of making visual analogies or of describing something that we didn't expect. Then Simon has responded to that in the script. So the script evolves after the possibilities of just explaining something in some way, or maybe this distance between the Galapagos and Ecuador was so hard to draw because like it would just be a speck, you know, in the water. But we need to. And so that was something we really had a hard time working with.
Yeah, so for a humanities prof, to be working collaboratively, it just feels so good. I love it.
You mean humanities usually are single authored sorts of things, yeah.
So I guess one last point is that there's this research process that where the video is evolving, where we're learning about the subject, where we go in with enough assumptions and curiosity to ask these questions, and sometimes I guess that would be there in the essay too.
But what you don't have in an essay is these sort of artistic choices, like this wonderful turtle with the little spots on his back, and the birds and the seals and so forth that you were able to portray that are almost tangible, right? They're so cute. You kind of remember them. And you go, oh gosh, what are we doing to these poor creatures?
So do those images kind of hold like?
Let's ask them.
Okay, are those images disarming, or do they hold? Do they assign certain ideas to your memory?
I feel that it kind of gives you, it has like a subconscious impact. So like, even if the words aren't effective, like showing that, and then the next scene with the turtle and the electric charging station, it's kind of like, even if you don't speak the language, you can pick up on the nonverbal communication. Everybody knows covering your ears that it's too loud. Yeah.
Here and then Lauren, you had a point, then Lauren in the back.
Yeah, I mean, I generally thought this was really effective at the visuals were helpful to like help you interpret what was being said, right? Like what you're just mentioning, you could react different ways to the script. You could hear about a tsunami of tourists and think, oh, that's just a windfall or something like that. But the visuals tell you not to interpret things that way. And the animals are always telling you how you should feel about things. But there's one spot in the video where it didn't work for me, at least. And that was talking about the biosecurity, because it's never good when you see a bunch of people walking around in like hazmat suits, right? And so there, even though that's supposed to be, oh, this is going to be a crucial, beneficial piece of infrastructure, the visuals actually like undercut that and maybe push my affective reaction in the wrong direction.
That was inspecting the goods for invasive species, and the question how you portray that. I think, yeah, that's a very interesting point.
We were under a lot of time pressure.
I was just going to say, these students did this in what, 14 weeks? Less than that.
Because there was a lot of research ahead of time, and then we had basically, you and Luke went during spring break.
Right.
So
We came back with the photos in March.
So that the script didn't crystallize until after your return, and the biodiversity, or excuse me, the inspections for invasives, et cetera. That was an important part of the story, but we didn't really have visuals to work with.
Yeah. Oh, well, because it doesn't exist.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah.
yeah.
So,
But and the pure horror, one of the most horrific parts of it is how they bring in gasoline, and it comes in on this boat at the coast. They put these little floats around the boat and hope it doesn't leak, and then they have a pipe that goes up into some tanker truck. I mean, it's like, oh wow, terrible. Lauren had a question, then we had some questions over here and a question back here. Whoop, you have the mic, so you can ask.
For me, it's the pedagogical impact of this tool that I'm seeing the potential of. Next year, I'll be leading a project, a Fulbright Hays project, where I'll be taking US educators to South Africa to develop modules for their classrooms back in the United States. And I'm thinking already, the topic will be environmental justice. And I'm thinking already that something like this would be a very important piece, and its pedagogical impact on effects on the students as a visual tool, even kids of elementary, secondary schools, they would really relate with something like this. And not only would that be beneficial for our students back in the United States, it would also be useful for teachers back in South Africa, because we want to forge relationships between US educators and South African educators. So something like this, I already took some notes. It would really be a powerful.
Let's see if we can get this lab to work on it. And also with Kelly and what you're doing with your students and their mental health issues. So lots of possibilities for this whole thing. We have a question in the back here.
Yeah, hi. I'm a big fan, Simon. I think you know that. But I wanted to ask about how you expect or how these videos are received in different country contexts. And I know when you went into the Netherlands, I think the idea or part of it was to take the policymakers down a notch and make them realize that they were being confronted by a big problem that the engineers might not be able to tackle, which was sea level rise. And that's probably not the intent with this video. It's more to educate. But I'm just wondering what thought goes into how countries in different development contexts might receive the learning tools and what you've seen. And I know you're in Indonesia as well, right?
Yeah, that's obviously a really important question. We want the video to do no harm. The video should be productive, should do good work, should lead to good results. And cultural sensitivity and intercultural sensitivity is absolutely crucial for that. And so we work hard at that. There's also time pressure, and that's that with the
Sources,
yeah, and
funding.
resources and all of that, right? So with the Galapagos one, that was tricky because we had very little time to work with, and none of the artists, nor Josh nor I, went to Galapagos. We didn't have an opportunity to speak to any Galapagos. We did speak to Maurizio a couple of times, but yeah, so in a certain sense, we were, and it was not as thorough as we
Oh,
would have
don't,
liked it.
it's a pedagogical experiment.
Yeah,
Don't, please,
yeah,
it was
okay.
really phenomenal what happened in, what, 7 weeks, really. They had students that had familiarized themselves with this whole project and then didn't even have the visual material too much later. I mean, it's really remarkable what they did. That's
you-
not,
Yeah,
to
you have to
appreciate that.
realize that animation, hand-drawn animation, is a very labor-intensive process. You don't just snap your fingers and it's there. So
I might have a little question. How did making these videos affect the students? Like, did it stress the students out to be so intimately depicting climate change and threats facing the energy sector? How did it feel to them?
I think, I mean, Simon, you've taught so many courses on this that, and Simon has told me about how it affects students. I mean, I think in some ways, Gabrielle, who was working on the video, I think that in some ways it opened up their eyes. And Gabrielle was looking at in South Africa ways of, I think, like, well, the question came up, well, why can't food be grown on the Galapagos? Why couldn't there be why couldn't that? And why couldn't, and what is ecotourism? And should we be suspicious of this this thing called ecotourism, or is there really an opportunity there? And so Gabrielle started doing research in between classes and finding these vineyards that are in South Africa and kind of researching that. And so I think in a way it was kind of an expansive kind of new awareness of the relationship between the issues on Galapagos and other places.
And these are fine arts students?
Well, he's a math major. So we have, I think we might have had, of the 4, we might have had 2 that are like a design minor or major. We had 2 that were not. So yeah, and that's how many of my classes are. I have people taking fine arts courses from all of the schools, really.
Extraordinary experience.
Yeah. So
To
so you
blend
get
the
people
knowledge,
with
the skills.
different backgrounds, bringing different things to the conversation. But Simon, you've had, I think you might have something to say about it.
yeah, I have a lot of experience. Yeah, right. So the different responses. One is just finally someone's talking about it, and talking about it in a way that also addresses the emotions that come along with it. It can be really overwhelming, and so sometimes some of our artists, I think, kind of try to compartmentalize a little bit because it is really very overwhelming. But it's all part of climate action, right? We're working towards targets, towards a good end, towards goals, towards and I think really crucial, very crucial, is the interaction with all the experts, because so often they're young people, they're really smart, they're really dedicated, they're motivated, and this is something that is very important for all of the sort of environmental or climate related courses that I teach. I always take steps to expose students to the vast range of networks of people who are working in the climate space, whether it's at Perry or at Kleinman or off campus, so that they realize they're not alone. And they also realize that there may be a way that I can sort of slide my career in that direction, or find a way that climate intersects with my career. So I want it always to be sort of that they realize that the climate change is an opportunity for them to live an exceptionally meaningful life.
Oh, that's lovely. We're running out of time, so I'm going to ask each of the speakers to give one message to the audience, and we'll start with Kelly about, I'm sorry to do that to you, about what you'd like to leave the audience with. And you've been a wonderful audience, very good questions. I'm sorry we can't respond to all of them that you had your hands up for. Kelly.
Yeah. The Galapagos Islands is known for being this extremely special place for all of the animals that can be found there, and the flora that can be found there as well, the geological things. But Galapagos is very special because of the people that live there. And I think empowering these people locally and giving them the tools to work towards protecting the place that they know and love is extremely novel in Galapagos. These people are frequently forgotten. And I think by doing this work and by interacting meaningfully and offering people opportunities to expand their knowledge and their ways to be participating citizens, it's been extremely meaningful. And I have a lot of faith that there will be positive impacts made in the future of the Galapagos Islands because of it. Yeah, so the people.
So I'm teaching a first-year seminar for the first time this year. It's called Climate Change, Community and the Arts in Indonesia. And we are currently reading Pramuja Anantatur's Buru Quartet, one of the novels from the Buru Quartet. And this is, and today, just before I came here, we were talking about two key words in this novel. One is organize, and the other is begin. I want to focus on organize is good because that means work together, not you can't do it by yourself. You need to organize. But the most important word is begin. So many, and this counts for me too. For the longest time, I know this is wrong. That's not right. Climate change. But begin. Just, you got to start.
I just appreciate being involved in this project. So, and thanks for the amazing questions. Draw and write and do. I mean, you can write too, but draw. Like, I think draw and then look at your drawings and then draw more. That's what I want to do today.
Thank you. And for me, this is the best example of Ben Franklin, right? It is the practical, the theoretical, the young, the older, everyone getting together around a problem, which is a global problem of climate change, and how we begin to organize to address it. So thank you very much. Have lunch for you. If you go into that room right there, pick up your box lunches.